Hey traders, welcome back to Alareso Capital. On today's video, we're going to go through the market update and we're also going to take a look at the weekly watch list. If you're interested in this information, make sure to stick all the way through this video. Welcome guys, welcome back to the channel. On today's video, we're going to take a look at the market, some of the levels that I'm going to be watching for next week. And of course, the main purpose of this video is to create a high probability roadmap going into next week. That way we can create a plan for what is the expectation of the market. So let's start here with the UBXY, which is the first important chart that I want to cover. And remember guys that if you find any value on this information, make sure to subscribe to the channel. So what is going on with the UBXY here? It's actually pretty interesting to see that the UBXY is starting to find some support at the 50 daily moving average. And if you have been following the channel for a while, you know that I prefer watching at the UBXY instead of watching at the VIX. One of the main reasons is because the UBXY tends to trade very similar to a stock. And that tends to create more reliable patterns for us to study volatility. So if we take a look here at what is happening with the UBXY, you can see that we are starting to find some support at the moving averages. And it's very important to to pay attention to this price action, because if the UBXY happens to break to the upside, then of course that is the expectation that we have for the VIX futures, and that is going to be the expectation that we have for volatility. Most of the time, the rule of thumb is if volatility is rising, then we're going to see a sell off in the stock market, especially the SPX and the indexes. Some of the stocks might try to fight against the current, but most of the time, all the stocks are going to follow the general market. So if you take a look at what the UBXY is doing here, you can see that my momentum indicators are pointing to the upside. Usually when we tend to happen this kind of signal, and you can see that we had this signal many times throughout this year, you can see that we tend to see these really strong spikes in volatility. And usually those spikes in volatility are followed by sell-offs in the market. And if you're not positioned correctly for these types of sell-offs, then you're most likely going to lose a lot of money. So let's take a look at the SPX. Now, one thing that I want to make very clear is that I continue to be bullish going into the end of the year. But for now, I do think that there's a high probability that we're going to pull back. Well, that we're going to pull back all the way to this 50 daily moving average that we have right here in the charts. You know that we were talking about the SPX and we were talking about the possibility of a continuation to the upside in the markets, but we were talking about this very important level of resistance, which is 5,880. Uh, Now that we tested that level, the expectation, of course, is that the SPX at some point is going to test that 6,000 level. However, based on the structure that we're seeing right now in the UBXY and based on the structure that we're seeing right now on the SPX, there's a high probability that we're going to see a deeper pullback than the one that we had in October, and probably we're going to see it most likely next week. So let me tell you what is the kind of the pattern that I'm seeing right now in the markets. You see that we had this really strong move to the upside. We have very positive momentum in both of my indicators. And of course, price was above those exponential moving averages. But right now, what is happening is that we are starting to see some negative divergence in the indicator. You can see that we had this negative cross. And of course, the SPX is starting to find resistance at this anchor VWAP zone, anchored from that swing high that we had in price. This is very important to understand, because if we happen to lose this anchor VWAP support zone that we had from this swing low in October, then most likely we're going to see the SPX losing this level. And then the next level that we're going to probably see as support is going to be that level of 5,680. One of the main reasons that I'm saying that this is probably going to act as support is because we have that 50 daily moving average, we have that swing low from October, and of course, we had this base and break from July. So we tend to see very important levels of support when we tend to have this kind of alignment of levels at a zone. So don't be surprised if we happen to see a sell off starting next week. I do think that is very important to be prepared for that type of price action. If we take a look at the QQQQ, we're going to see something very similar, from the SPX. Now, the thing about the QQQQ is that the price action that we're seeing is going to be a little bit more, it's going to be a little bit more hard to understand, because you can see that the QQQQ attempted, right? You can see right here that the QQQQ attempted a breakout, but we had a lot of sellers. You can see that momentum has been trending to the downside. And if we happen to come back into this range, right, you can see that we're trying to break above it. We're back into the range. But if we happen to close this gap and have a close below these moving averages, then I do think that the probability of a sell up also to that 50 daily moving average is going to be a high probability scenario going into next week. So be very, very careful if you want to open new long exposure going into next week. I do have some spy puts. Let me show you right here what is kind of my plan with that position. I am looking for that retracement that I was mentioning. I'm risking actually the debit that I pay for my puts, but this is kind of the swing that I'm looking to hold. And of course, this is going to be the profit zone in which I'm going to be looking to take profits in that position, in that bearish position for the SPY. So this is going to be the first setup that I'm going to be watching for next week. It's going to be a short setup in the SPY. And what is really interesting is the IWM, because this is one of the choppiest indexes that we had. But this was kind of the clue that I was watching this week to sell my longs into strength and to start various positions. You can see right here that the move that we had in the UBXY, we basically gave back that entire move. And you can see right here that momentum is negative in both of my indicators. And we're starting to see sellers at those exponential moving averages. I do think that there is a high probability that we're going to break below this 50 daily moving average. Maybe we're going to close this gap that we have somewhere around 212, or we're just going to test these lows right here. Of course, for this thesis to be invalidated, we're going to need a daily close above this candle of 222. And then, of course, we're going to need a daily close above that anchor VWAP zone of resistance in the IWM. Basically, the message of this video is to be very careful if you're long going into next week. We have seen a very strong rally in the SPX, but with the elections coming, and with the price action that we're seeing in volatility, I do think that we have to be really careful when looking for levels to get long. So that's the most important thing that I do want to cover with this video. In terms of setups, I'm mostly just watching the indexes. I do think that watching the indexes is going to be pretty easy going into next week. Um, we can also take a look at the DIA, and you can see right here that the DIA is already giving is giving up these moving averages. We are already below that 21 exponential, and you can see right here how important is that 21 exponential, especially when price is trending to the upside. So when we tend to lose that moving averages, when we tend to lose those moving averages in the kind of way that we lost it on Friday, I do think that it's very important to pay attention. The first level of support, of course, is going to be this 417.50 level, somewhere around that 50-day moving average. But I wouldn't be surprised if we happen to see a following leg to the downside in the DIA until the SPY reaches those levels of support that we were talking about. So be very careful with the market going into next week, guys. I do think that a little bit of patience is going to be important. Most likely we're going to get some really nice opportunities. We tend to see some selling into the end of October. Remember that for funds, a new fiscal year usually starts in November. And that's why we tend to see this phenomenon in which we happen to see sellings in October, but we tend to see really strong Novembers, is because we tend to have a lot of new flows coming into the market. But it's very important to be patient. So once again, thank you so much, guys, for your time. I hope that you had an amazing weekend, and I will see you on future videos. Take care and bye bye.